okay, the 15-minute city thing. Has anyone actually had any sort of answer out of anyone as to what their issue with that is? Because, you know, for those, if you're in different countries, you might call it something different. The 15-minute city is this concept that you'd live in a community where you're no more than 15 minutes walk away from your local amenities, like the post office or some banking facilities. You don't really get banks in local areas anymore, but you might get a cash machine. Or your GP, you know, or convenience store, this sort of thing, like a petrol, like, okay, you don't walk to a petrol station, like, unless you want a Mars bar. But, you know, like, has anyone had, out of anyone, their reason for not liking this concept that you have local amenities? Because that gets me. So I think the people who fear them think it's this thin end of the wedge to usher in forced relocation to ghettos, secret police, restriction of free movement, etc. But there's no boundaries around these things. Like, there's no part of the country where if you move outside of your immediate community, you have to, like, produce papers or anything. I still don't. It's like, really, honestly, I'd like to talk to one of the, like, I have come across various flavours of like gammon and talk to them about various things. I've never actually found one that will openly, do you know what, this is probably around the other way, that will openly admit to believe in 50-minute cities are bad. I just see it everywhere online, but I've never come across anyone in the wild. Saying that I've never heard anyone have a problem with having amenities within walking distance. They always fear what could come next, and they think it's sinister. Yeah. Again, I'd like to talk to one of these people and just ask what they think is coming next. Since having all your local services be reachable within a 50-minute walk if you choose to is hard to argue with, they'll say it's secretly a plan to lock people into 50-minute cities, and if you try to leave, it's off to the camps with you. Ridiculous. I want to meet one of these people. I'd have such fun. Because I'll tell you something, this dystopian future they're fearing, it's going to happen, you know. It's actually going to happen. Do you know how it's going to happen? Because if we continue to allow the level of wealth disparity that keeps accelerating, we're actually going to end up with South African style gated communities. I mean, there are already sort of some in Britain, but they're not really noticeable, so it's not really a big thing. But we're going to end up with gated communities. And so then they'll sort of be right, won't they? Only it'll be the people they support that will have introduced it to us. Sometimes, you know, when you think about some of the disinformation flying about, I get it. I do get it. I get how some people can be made to believe that you've got, oh, well, if you have more people in the country, then that's going to strain resources in the NHS. It's like, no, because the proportion of immigrants in this country is about 12%, whereas the proportion of immigrant workers in the NHS is about 20%. So in actual fact, no, immigration is shortening the queue to the NHS. But I get how people would think the opposite. I get how they would think. And the same goes to other like services. Because I get how people can view a country as having fixed resources. And of course, if you think the country's got fixed resources and you have more people in, then those resources are getting spread thinner. So there's a certain logic there. It's wrong, but there's a certain logic there. Whereas some of the stuff, there's no logic to it. Like, how does anyone in all seriousness have a problem with the 15-minute city idea? This idea that in an urban area, civil planning is such that you will never be more than 15 minutes away from essential public services. Like, who the hell says, I don't want local public services? Like, who says that? Also under there saying proportion of immigrants, not proportion of immigrants using NHS services. No, because the other side of it. So yeah, going back to what I was saying, sorry. 12% of the population, but about 20% of the NHS staff force. But the vast majority of immigrants are economic migrants, which means they're working age, which means they're not really using the NHS much. Now, people who use the NHS the most. Number one, elderly people. Of course, your health's failing, right? So, although there are some immigrants who live here for long enough and then they settle and then they become retired, most don't. Most go back home. And then the other end of it would be children. Well, again, we don't have child labour, so economic migrants tend not to be children. An economic migrant might bring children with them, but then domestic workers will also have children. But they might the one on the visa themselves, the economic migrant, is not retired and they're not a child. So, you know, they're only going to have to use the NHS when either they're ill or injured, which is not a big part of anyone of working age's life. And I wish the government would actually come out with things like this to explain it as well. I wish the government would actually push back a bit. I get that they can't, you have to be a bit careful in politics. The public have got this idea in their heads. You can't turn around and say to the public, no, you're stupid. Because Nigel Farage just then straight away says, oh, you see, they're all sneering at you, looking down at you like ignorant peasants, right? So, but you can come out with statistics. You can throw statistics out there and says, well, this is the reality of the situation. Let us just counter that little point, shall we? Reform politics like distracting a baby with some shiny keys. But it is. It's literally, it is a distraction. They peddle lies. You know, again, when it comes to the NHS, that like Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson, they've all done it. Sort of said, why should we have to pay our taxes so people could come straight off the boat and get to the front of the queue for the NHS? They ain't even in the queue for the NHS. You can't get anything on the NHS without an NHS number, which you cannot get until you're processed, and you ain't at the front of the queue. I mean, this is what I would like to say to these people. Have you actually been to a hospital or a GP? Have you ever... I would march one of these people to the hospital and say, right, you try and get seen to without giving them your NHS number or the details so they can look it up. You try getting seen to without it. You go, I would dare them to either go to their local GP or local hospital and say, I've just come in off the boat, I need some medical attention. I dare them to try it. Be told to piss off. And there's two key parts of the brain when it comes to like what you might call problem solving. One of them is the frontal cortex. It's very, very, very clever, but it's also very slow, but it's also inferior because the part of your brain that deals with your panic responses, your fight and flight and all the rest of it, when that's triggered, it takes over, and it has to. For your own survival, you need the stupid part of your brain because you can't afford the clever part of your brain to be in charge if you're facing a life threat, an urgent threat to your life. Because, hunter-gatherer days, you come face to face with a saber-toothed tiger. You can't afford to let the clever part of your brain go, right, let's sit down and work out, the different possible routes out of here. What are the chances that there's another saber-toothed tiger in a different bush, and spend half an hour coming up with a really good plan for running away from it? Saber-toothed tiger's eaten you by then. So you need the relatively stupid but fast-acting part of your brain to take over and go, we're just going to leg it, mate. Or, well, choose between giving it a whack on the snout or legging it, or both, or just freezing there and getting eaten anyway. Because sometimes the stupid part of your brain's really stupid. And the way, these grifters work these days is they're constantly triggering that part of your brain. So they're keeping people in a constant state of like panic or fight and flight, however you want to call it. So at the weekend, when I was off in London, my wife was at a craft fair. Right. Now, it wasn't actually in this immediate area. I actually thought it was at first, and it wasn't. It was a bit out. But nonetheless, it's this general region. And where are we going? Oh, over there. And she said on one of the stalls, there's this woman selling crystals, right? And they're anti-Wi-Fi crystals. Oh, no, not all of them are. That's silly, sorry. Some of them are anti-Wi-Fi crystals. But what you do with them is you use them to scrub off negative energy. And the people around her were taking it seriously as well. Oh, is it like a sponge then? She go, no, you just wash them off. Wash the negative energy off. But she does another thing as well. Like this Reiki healing thing. But what she does, right, she was signing people up for this plan. £5 a week, right? What do you get for your £5 a week? Right, here's what you get. So at some predetermined time, prearranged time, you have to sit in a quiet room in your house, right? And she, from her home, will send you some positive energy. £5 a week. And there were a disturbing number of people signing up for it. At that point, I'm thinking to myself, this is sort of a problem. This is a bit of a problem, really. Modern medicine is going to start going backwards. The worst this is when BS like crystals and other used instead of proven medicine. Yeah. I mean, you could argue if at the end of the day, if some fool wants to spend £5 a week on having positive energy spent, I will just be clear, by the way, as a scientist, I cannot let it slide. There is no such thing as positive or negative energy, transmittable by people or not. Energy is a scalar quantity, right? She'd be on stronger ground if she said force. I'm going to send you positive force, because in theory that could be a thing. Only she's Dutch. So then I would just have to pick on the fact she cannot transmit force like that. But at least in theory, there's such a thing as a positive force. There's no such thing as positive energy. But anyway, yes, you're quite right. You know, it's one thing if some idiot wants to send £5 a week to receive this positive energy and then complain about the cost of living, because that's what they'll do as well. They'll moan about Labour's budget, won't they, later this month? They really think, and they're spending £5 a week on positive energy. But yes, it's much worse if they actually hand over this money to treat an actual illness instead of getting medical attention. See, you could argue that if they've got mental health problems, they might as well use a crystal because they'll not get anything on the NHS. That's you know, the real failure of the NHS forever. It doesn't. You know, if you've got serious mental health problems, you're basically knackered. We have no. It's one of the, like when you think about like injustices or disgraces of a wealthy nation, and there are lots of them. I actually think by far the most shocking for me is the complete lack of any mental health support in this country. Like there's I know there are psychiatrists on the NHS, so it's not like I can say there's literally zero. But I've known lots of people who've had mental health problems, and not one of the serious, and not one of them has ever had anything on the NHS. So it's like obviously regional a bit, or a bit down to luck. And I mean, I was reading a thing in The Guardian today about a fella who died. He was homeless at 13, in and out of prison, all the rest of it. Clearly had massive mental health issues. The article does allude to what they probably caused by. And you know, all I could think reading this article is it's not a hard luck tale. It's a tale of this person's been in care, they've been in prisons, and they've never had any mental health support, because there isn't any. It doesn't exist. We don't treat it seriously in this country. Once went for a massage. Oh, I don't know where this is going. And the lady had a speaker playing calming music, which had an anti-EM energy sticker on it to protect us. Oh, that's nice to know. I was getting a bit worried there. I was getting a bit worried when someone starts an anecdote with, I was having a massage when. Because, you know, that can go in lots of different directions. Anti-EM sticker. Okay, yeah. Right. I don't think a sticker would do it. I mean, what I would do if I was in this situation, I would say, if you want to protect us from EM, you need to put it in a Faraday cage, right? Only it then won't be able to receive any transmission. So if it's a radio, you plumb out of luck. And that would be a thing, because, you know, if it's just a player, sure, whatever. But if it's a radio, it's like if it's receiving radio signals, it is in fact not anti-EM. She used her phone to stream the music over Wi-Fi, control the volume with an IR remote. Good thing the sticker was there. Oh, that would have... Oh, I wouldn't have been able to keep my mouth shut. I would have given her a science lesson. Absolutely incredible. The level of scientific ignorance is depressing. But it is, I'm a teacher, right? And I think science is important. We should teach science. But as a science teacher, I will say the way we teach science often is very wrong as well. You have to teach the sort of academic science because, you know, if you want to go on to be a scientist, as I did, you need that background. So you need to learn all those things at school. But for a lot of people, it's not very practical. You've even got very intelligent, educated people, but just not educated in science, whose level of scientific knowledge is pathetic. Like, it works in tiers. You have in Britain, you have the key stages. You'll have something similar in every country. And the idea is, well, this is your foundational stuff. You learn the basics first, then you go into the next bit and the next bit and the next bit. And that all sounds fine until you realise that the way you graduate from the foundation stuff to the next tier stuff is not by mastering the foundation stuff, but just by reaching a certain age. You know, it's like you do 2 years on this, and then you do 4 years on this, and then you do 3 years on this, and then you do 2 years on this. And it's like just based on your birthday when you progress, not how well you do it. And we'd be much better off if we said, no, you progress from step 1 to step 2 once you've cracked step 1. And if some people take longer, that's fine. Because do you know what? The people who are going to go slower on it, they're not going to really get step 4 or 5 anyway. And there's no need, and there wouldn't need to be a stigma over something like that. There should be no problem with that at all. Because then what happens is you get kids who get towards the end of school and they're thoroughly turned off from school. It's really hard to teach them anything. And you can't blame them because they haven't learnt anything. They've learnt to read and write and do a bit of maths, and that's about it. I was tempted to explain how EM works, how Wi-Fi works, etc., but thought better of it. If a sticker makes her feel better about what is basically an irrational phobia, who am I to ruin that? I'll tell you who I would be to ruin that, a science teacher. Plus, she fixed my back and neck, so I was super grateful. Even so, I would consider it my civic duty